Okay, well, good morning, everyone. My name is Juan Carlos Padilla, and I helped organize this seminar. Before we get started, I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time to be here with us today. I'm very excited for today's presentation. My supervisor, Dr. Jill McDonald, who I help organize these seminars for, will not be able to join us today, and she expresses her deepest apologies for not being here. But nonetheless, we have a very exciting presentation for you all today. Today's presentation will be on the Taking Time to Connect randomized clinical trial, which is a clinical trial that is run by faculty, staff, and students from here in our department in public health sciences. But I'll leave it to the team to give us more details on what the clinical trial is and their roles within the trial. Before we get started, I'd just like to go through a few housekeeping items. I attached an evaluation form. Really appreciate if you'd be able to complete it at the end of the presentation. It shouldn't take you more than 2 minutes. It's a very in regards to questions, we'll time at the end of the presentation for any questions that you may have. But if you have questions during the presentation, you can add it to the chat box or raise your hand, and my colleague and I, Deborah, we'll be monitoring the chat box for any questions. And without further ado, I'll pass it along to Clara and the rest of the team so they can get started. Thank you.
So thank you for having us today. We're the Taking Time to Connect randomized clinical trial team, and we will be presenting on the experience that we have gained as public health students in this clinical trial research with underserved populations. So this research reported in this presentation is supported by the Partnership for the Advance of Cancer Research, which is between New Mexico State University and the Fred Hutch Cancer Research Center. The partnership is funded by the National Cancer Institute.
Today, we will first introduce the team, share the phases we went through to get to today's randomized clinical trial, explain the Taking Time to Connect randomized clinical trial, how it's implemented, and what the clinical trial means to us. Okay, let's meet the team. We will all share our name and study role, where we are from, and how we get involved with the Taking Time to Connect study. You all can see on your screen a picture of the whole team in one of our weekly online meetings during the pandemic. You can also see our principal investigator, Dr. Rebecca Palacios, in the left bottom of the picture.
Hello, thanks, Lady, for getting us started. My name is Clara Reyes, and I'm the program manager for the randomized clinical trial. I'm from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I first became involved with this study as a graduate research assistant in its very, very beginning phases in 2016 when I joined NMSU's Masters of Public Health program and Community Health Education. I was a Peace Corps Coveredor Fellow, which gave me a graduate assistantship, and I was very lucky to interview with Dr. Palacios and be placed on this project.
Hello, I'm Adriana Hernandez. I'm from Las Cruces, New Mexico, and I graduated from this college in 2019, and I'm a health educator on the study. I was first connected with Dr. Palacios through an email from Leti Gallegos about a research assistant position with the NMSU Cancer Outreach Corps. And so I emailed Dr. Palacios right away, and I got an interview. And I was hired my junior year as an undergraduate research assistant with the Cancer Outreach Corps. A few months later, I transitioned to a data collector position for the study. And after I graduated, I was hired full-time as a health educator for the study.
Hi, everybody. My name is Isela Garcia. I have lived in both El Paso and Juarez, so I am 100% fronteriza. I am currently the program manager for the NMSU Cancer Outreach Corps, which is also part of the U54 family. I'm And on the trial, I serve as a bilingual health educator for the experimental program called Conexiones. And I got my start with this project during its phase 2, which I'm going to talk a little bit about today. And I got involved because when I started my MPH here at NMSU, I was assigned to Dr. Palacios, and she was my advisor. And so when I went in for my advising appointment, at some point it became an interview, and I was and I was hired as a GA with her. So that's how I came to be.
Hi everyone, my name is Lily Marquez. I'm from El Paso, Texas. And the way I was introduced to the study and became a health educator is I actually emailed Dr. Joe Tamaka, who's the public health graduate coordinator. And he contacted me to Dr. Palacios. She introduced like a little bit of the study and then offered me an interview, and I just decided to go for it. And yeah, so now I'm here.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lady Collazos. My role in the study is as an experimental health educator. I was born and raised in Colombia, and I got involved with the Taking Time to Connect study last semester when I was assigned as a graduate assistant for Dr. Palacios, and she introduced this study to me.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ceci Corona. I am from Las Cruces, New Mexico. My role on the study is data collector. And as an undergraduate kinesiology major here at NMSU, I became interested in public health. So I asked a professor of mine for some guidance, and he referred me to Dr. Palacios. And when I met with her, I asked her about research opportunities, and she offered me a research position, which is data collector. And I became a part of the team.
Hello, everyone. I am Anel Mena, and I am also a data collector in this study, and I am from El Paso, Texas. So the way I came to the study is that I was about to graduate from my bachelor's degree in anthropology, and I had been accepted to a PhD program in anthropology at the Florida International University. And I got accepted to the master's in public health at NMSU. And I was really indecisive about where to go. So I started emailing faculty for both schools. And right after sending the emails, Dr. Palacios was the first one to respond, and I was able to build communication with her. And therefore I decided to accept the master's offer at NMSU, and I started working with Dr. Palacios, which was honestly the best decision I made.
All right, and now we will share all the work that we've had to do to get to today's study.
So as I mentioned in my introduction, I came on in 2016 as a graduate research assistant, just in time to participate in a needs assessment that we did with Latina mothers diagnosed with cancer in El Paso and Doña Ana counties. And during these focus groups, mothers shared their challenges as well as all the resources they used to kind of garner their personal strength to overcome the physical and mental stress of the cancer. And during these focus groups, they also shared with us that they would have wanted an education program on how to communicate with their children about their cancer. So we found the Enhancing Connections program, which is from the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center. And it's an evidence-based program that reduces stress and anxiety in non-Latina mothers, non-Latino white mothers living with cancer and their children. So we decided to make a plan to culturally adapt Enhancing Connections for Latina mothers in our community. And Isela will talk about that now.
And like I mentioned, I came in at phase 2 in 2017. And so after the needs assessment was completed, the initial adaptation was made. And so Enhancing Connections then became Conexiones, which was an evidence-based program culturally adapted for Latina mothers who are diagnosed with cancer. And so at this phase, we presented the initial adaptation to members of our community for them to evaluate. And so we conducted this evaluation through focus groups with Latina mothers to assess if the wording and sequencing of the program was all right, so that to make sure that it was cognitively appropriate. And then they also evaluated the relevance of the materials to make sure that that they culturally reflect their Latina beliefs and their Latina parenting values. And these focus groups were audio recorded and analyzed, and they were a part of my master's thesis. And in my thesis, I conducted a qualitative analysis, which helped us to further refine the Conexiones program and continue adapting the materials before we started pilot testing.
Then in 2018, we started phase 3, where we pilot tested the culturally adapted Conexiones program. So in this phase, we tested the feasibility and short-term impact of Conexiones on a small sample of Latina childbearing mothers recently diagnosed with cancer who were living in Doñana and El Paso counties. And this was a really important step for us because it helped us fix issues that came up during the survey or education sessions, and it helped us improve how we conduct the study and how we interact with or respond to our participants. During this process, we also established protocols necessary to address issues that are common for a low-income environment. And we also were able to develop the standardized operating protocols. And this is all the work that we had to do to be able to actually test to see if the program works well for our priority population. And we're doing this now in a randomized clinical trial, testing the short-term efficacy of Conexiones with Latina mothers diagnosed with cancer living in New Mexico and Texas. So this randomized clinical trial is one of the university's first clinical trials, and we are currently recruiting participants to test 2 cancer education programs called Conexiones and Taking Time. So both education programs are delivered over the phone to make it more convenient for the participants. And they also provide Latina mothers diagnosed with cancer with the information and skills they need to deal with their worries and their concerns related to their cancer. So this study will help us see which is most effective in reducing maternal and child's anxiety and depression related to the mom's cancer diagnosis.
All right, so how are Latina mothers enrolled? So after we contact them, then we make sure that they're interested in the study. And then we go ahead and proceed with the screening call. After that, we conduct an informed consent call. And then we confirm their medical eligibility. And so the study has strict eligibility criteria. So Latina mothers must have received an early stage cancer diagnosis of any type within the last 2 years to be able to participate. And once they're enrolled in the study, we schedule the mom's baseline survey. And after the baseline survey is completed, our Fred Hutch or UW team randomizes the participant into one of the 2 programs, so the control intervention or the experimental intervention. And since our NMSU team is interacting directly with the study participants, it's just nice to have our partners randomize participants for us. It's just like another layer of protection from any bias that we may have when assigning study participants. And so after a participant is randomized, they are assigned to a health educator from the corresponding program. And after they complete the education program, the participant is contacted 2 more times for a follow-up survey, which our data collectors will now describe.
Anel's and I job as data collectors is to conduct telephone surveys with participants at baseline, 3-month post-baseline, and 6-month post-baseline in the participant's preferred language, which would be either English or Spanish. The 3-month post-baseline assesses the benefits attained from the program, and the 6-month post-baseline is to see if they retain what they learned from the interventions. To measure the primary outcomes in the diagnosed mother, we use 5 different scales. The Center of Epidemiological Studies Depression Scale is used to measure depressed mood. The State Trait Anxiety Inventory measures anxiety. The Parenting Skills Checklist measures the mother's skills to elicit the child's concerns and to connect and assist the child in coping. The Family Peer Relationship Questionnaire measures the mother's skills to assist the child in disclosing negative feelings and bad things. And the Parenting Self-Efficacy measures the mother's confidence to help the child and to stay calm and manage.
So primary outcomes for the child, we use the child's behavioral checklist, which is reported by the mother. And it measures the internalizing behavioral emotional problems, the externalizing behavioral and emotional problems, the child anxiety, and the child's depression.
As data collectors, we go through rigorous training to ensure we deliver the surveys correctly. So when I started as an undergraduate research assistant, Adrina trained me. And now as a senior data collector, I have trained Anel in all protocols. The training process took a couple months. And during those couple months, we trained to receive research ethics and compliance training. And we also rehearsed scenarios that may come up during the survey. We also continuously edit and translate survey materials that we use, like the actual survey and scripts we follow or protocols. When the COVID-19 pandemic hit, we had to adapt. So we added a survey item to capture any distress our participants were experiencing during the study. It's important for us to capture this information because it could potentially impact our study outcomes. We also added a COVID-19 protocol so that we can refer participants to the appropriate resources. We also use Qualtrics survey software to enter all of our data. And before conducting a survey with a study participant, we prepare by practicing with one another. So this includes practicing common scenarios that come up often or common questions that the participant has, as well as our protocols to deal with difficult situations.
So we remain blind to the participant's intervention to avoid introducing any bias. If I were to know the intervention type, then I might try to influence the participant's responses. Like, for example, if I knew that the participant was in Conexiones intervention, then I might try to bias the participant's responses in a favorable direction. So during the survey, participants may share issues that they may be experiencing in addition to the cancer. Like, for example, mothers may mention that their children are thinking about suicide. And by law, we are required to report any suicidal ideation or behavior or abuse to the appropriate authorities. And we have to develop protocols to guide all research staff in doing this. We also develop protocols to address socioeconomic burdens shared with the research staff. We follow these protocols in a systematic way to ensure that we protect the integrity of the study. The participants expressed several difficult stories about what they or their children are experiencing, which can be emotionally and mentally draining to the data collector. So as data collectors, it is very important to find ways to take care of ourselves. And when these difficult situations do come up, we make sure to follow the taking care of you protocol. And this means that we take time for ourselves that we can, so we can deal with any difficult moments that come up during the survey. For example, after having an emotional survey, I like to call Ceci or Clara to decompress, and then I go for a run to clear my head. And then the team is divided between NMSU and the University of Washington. So when sharing information, it is very important that we don't share any personal markers that might express who the participant is and make sure that it's password protected, everything. And finally, after each survey, we review the survey recordings. Like for example, if Ceci finishes delivering a survey, I will review her survey recording in order to ensure that she is delivering the survey correctly. So Ceci and I also share other outside roles other than data collection, such as recruitment. We both recruit participants from medical offices and community organizations.
We provide all participants with cancer resource directories since we know our study cannot possibly meet all the needs of the population we're trying to serve. So me and Anel help with the research of additional cancer resources. I am also a liaison for community health workers, so I make sure to contact them monthly to check in on their recruitment efforts.
All right, so now we'll be talking about the control intervention. So Glada and I are both health educators for the control intervention, and this intervention is a one-time scripted education session done by telephone. So both Glada and I trained for months to be able to conduct the control intervention in both English and Spanish, and we trained with mentors from both NMSU and the University of Washington. And we remain blind to the experimental intervention because we don't want to unintentionally contaminate participants to what is in the experimental intervention. So once we're assigned a participant, we schedule a session with that participant at a time convenient for them. Then we prepare for the session by practicing with a control group team member. Then we go ahead and conduct the session with the participant by phone and in their preferred language, English or Spanish. Then we follow all the appropriate protocols if issues arise during those sessions. And then finally, the sessions are reviewed by a control group team member to ensure that we're delivering the intervention correctly to all our participants. So my other roles in this study are managing some communications with our community partners. So I develop and distribute a monthly newsletter that provides study updates to our community partners. And I also draft weekly social media posts that advertise the study. And I also help with monthly continuing education meetings with our community health workers that help us recruit for the study. And I also help update the cancer resource directory as needed, and I help with recruitment as well.
All right, so now we have the experimental intervention part of the study, and this consists of 5 sessions delivered at 2-week intervals. And so because the experimental intervention takes more time, we actually have 4 interventionists who deliver the 5 sessions by telephone.
As experimental health educators within the clinical trial, we have learned how to deliver a culturally adapted intervention program to Latina women with cancer. We have had the opportunity to have mentors from New Mexico State University and the University of Washington. The training process usually takes a long time and practice before we start delivering the program with an actual participant. We also deliver an interactive and a scripted program in English and Spanish by telephone according to the participant's preference. We also remain blind to the control intervention to avoid contaminating the experimental intervention. We implement the same protocols as the other team members to protect the study outcomes and the participants' well-being since we are working with a vulnerable population.
And then we also make sure to perform quality control. So we basically verify our delivered sessions. And this is again to ensure that we are following our protocols and to ensure that the participants are receiving the same dose of the intervention. And then we have senior and junior health educators. So the senior health educators also help train the junior health educators before delivering a session, just to make sure that we're all prepared.
I also contribute to the team with other tasks such as back translation and internet search about cancer resources in a specific locations. The back translation ensures that the original translation from Spanish to English was accurate.
And I'm also involved in the recruitment of our participants. So I usually do this by contacting potential participants, community agencies, or medical providers, or we also recruit through our social media platforms. So I help develop the posts that you see on our Instagram and our Facebook pages, like the one shown right here.
All right, and being part of this randomized clinical trial has helped each of us develop incredibly useful skills and has provided us opportunities that we will be able to use to our advantage while attending school and well into our careers as public health professionals. So for me, I have had the opportunity to help develop our IRB materials and upload those to Maestro, which is the system that NMSU uses for IRB. I've also received city trainings in social and behavioral research, good clinical practice, HIPAA. So these trainings are necessary at any institution to conduct human subjects research and clinical trial research. And the HIPAA training is also really important for the population that we work with because we do also deal with their medical information. I've also been able to work with Qualtrics survey software and SPSS as a data collector. And those are really great skills to have because I've gotten really good data collection and management skills from those. I've also been able to use Atlas TI, which is a qualitative data analysis software. So I've been able to use that in developing my manuscript so I can analyze qualitative data using that program. And as research team members, we also have opportunities for publications. So for me, I'm working on a manuscript that is a case analysis that I'll hopefully submit for publication later this year. And I've also had the opportunity to do oral presentations, so like in community meetings or at conferences. So at the NMPHA conference last year, I was able to do an oral presentation about my case analysis. And I've also had the opportunity to do poster presentations. And one of the big ones for me was at the American Association of Cancer Research, Cancer Health Disparities Conference in San Francisco. And I also did the Fred Hutch Summer Undergraduate Research Internship in 2019.
As I mentioned, I'm the program manager for the NMSU Cancer Outreach Corps. I graduated in 2019 and started this position in 2020. And all these skills that I learned as part of the study, I continue using them as a program manager. For example, as part of outreach, we look for evidence-based cancer programs that we can implement in our communities, and we culturally adapt them before we implement. And so I continue the cultural adaptation process. And we also have our communities evaluate all the materials that they receive so that we can get feedback and measure where we can improve on our adaptations. And because we do all these evaluations in outreach, I still have to develop a lot of IRB protocols because we are working with human subjects. And so I still need to have my city trainings up to date. And I still, for data analysis and management, I use Qualtrics and SPSS. For my thesis, I learned how to use the Atlas TI when I was inductively coding for my qualitative analysis. And of course, I did my thesis on phase 2 data, and hopefully it's going to be published anytime soon, I hope. And as part of the study and beyond, I've been able to present at conferences. I presented at Sweeter conferences when they were in person, the American Association of Cancer Research, New Mexico Public Health Association, and also the Cultural Competence Conference hosted by Texas Tech. I also got the opportunity to be an intern of the Éxito program, which is a training program that prepares Latino cancer researchers in applying to doctoral programs. And also as part of the U54 staff, I continue in other professional development courses.
I think for me, the city trainings have been extremely valuable. They're not just like a NMSU requirement. So a lot of institutions that do research also require the city trainings. And so they're just a great thing to have in our resume, and they do come in handy because they are very, very important. And then I also had the opportunity to have training in inductive coding. So this has helped me in my classes since we're learning about data analysis and qualitative research. And I think overall, having these skills in our resume just opens more opportunities for us.
About me, I have had the opportunity of being trained in different areas, such as delivering the Conexiones program in English and Spanish, also in inductive coding, social and behavioral research, and other city trainings. And this is helpful because it's not only helping me with my classes, but also in developing my professional skills.
For myself, I would say going into the Masters of Public Health program, I felt more prepared. I've already seen these skills kind of already pay off. So I've had some experience in preparing the IRB materials. The city trainings have been helpful to not only know how to do research in the right way, but it's also been helpful to connect this with like what I've been learning in my classes. I've learned how to use Qualtrics survey software and SPSS statistics software for data collection, which I've also used in classes. I was able to present a poster at NMSU's Research and Creativity Week last fall. And also working with the team has opened an opportunity for me to attend the Fred Hutch Summer Internship Program this coming summer. So I'll be working with Dr. Jones on the validation of culturally sensitive measures of depression and anxiety in cancer survivors.
So as I mentioned before, I come from a background of humanities and social sciences. So this clinical trial really gave me a background of the health sciences. There's two different ways of conducting research. So I did have previously city training on social and behavioral research when I was working with the professor in my undergrad. However, the study was able to offer me the opportunity to renew my city training in social behavioral research, which if you didn't know, you have to renew it every certain amount of time. And it also offered other city trainings, which have been helpful. I also developed other skills in using different software, such as Qualtrics survey and SPSS statistics, which I have used in class and in other things. I have also had the opportunity to conduct oral presentations with the team about the clinical trials, such as this one. And finally, there have been several job opportunities that have been offered to me due to the intensive training and skills that I have gained from this study.
I'm going to talk about also the skills that I've had with the trial. When I started as a graduate research assistant for that phase 1, I was able to use that data for my own thesis. So I was a qualitative analysis. And so, yes, I had to turn in the IRB, create my own study protocol, be my own PI on my thesis, which eventually did lead to publication. I've been able to present my thesis work at oral presentations like my team members mentioned, and also poster presentations at national conferences around the country when we were still going in person. And that was a huge help because the partnership did support us every step of the way at these presentations. So that means like printing your poster, paying for your membership fees, travel. These all would have been huge barriers to me to be able to engage in research in this way if the partnership hadn't helped with that. I know because of my skills and inductive coding training that I got from the Fred Hutch to use for my thesis, as well as teaching myself Atlas TI for my thesis and the city trainings. I know all of that made me a really competitive candidate for that Fred Hutch cancer research internship. So I was able to participate in that one summer. They wanted me to use Atlas TI. They wanted me to help with a qualitative needs assessment. And that also led to a publication with my mentor there. So yeah, all of the things listed here have prepared me really well to be program manager. I think I use all these skills all the time, obviously, because we use this for our study. But I think it also made me really competitive for other jobs too. I was being recruited from other places when I was done. And I chose to stay with the study because I love the research we're doing and I really believe in what we're doing for the community. And I feel like I just keep building on my research skills. Okay, so what the RCT means to me. Well, I came to the study from a background of really grassroots community health education. And I had no idea what public health research was and what it looked like to do public health research with community. And so I quickly learned, working with Dr. Palacios, that a lot of the evidence-based programs we hear about on the national level aren't typically tested in our minority groups. So they're mostly tested and not in Caucasian white populations. So with this study, I've learned that can really fuel those disproportionate burden we're seeing in these underserved groups living with cancer in our country in different economic environments. And so for me, the taking time to connect clinical trial means engaging community in health equity research, where we're actually proposing, developing, and evaluating a potential solution that may alleviate that burden among our Latina mothers diagnosed with cancer and their children.
And for me, I feel like I have a really personal connection to what we're doing in this study because my mom is a cancer survivor. And when I was 17, I became her main caretaker. So I always think of how helpful a program like this or a study like this could have been for my mom and really our entire family during her recovery. So it makes me very hopeful that we are truly helping the moms that we work with. And also working on this study has shown me how important evidence-based research and programs that are also culturally adapted or culturally tailored, how important these are to underserved communities. And this has helped me decide that public health research is what I'd like to do for the rest of my life. And thanks to the experience and opportunities I've had while working on this study, I've been admitted to a PhD program and I'll be starting this fall.
So what does this study mean to me? I mean, I got to be a part of this journey at a very early phase of it, and to see it come to fruition to a clinical trial and hopefully more, and to hopefully reach out to more people. It means the world to me, especially being someone from the border and knowing how much we need these programs here. And in my preparation for my thesis and in my classes and in everything that I learned on the job, I learned to truly value the input of communities, because at the end of the day, we're bringing these programs to them and they should have a say every step of the way of the adaptation process. So it's very important that we immerse ourselves in the community and accept their feedback and accept what their needs are, so that we can better serve them at the end of the day.
Well, for me, the study means advocacy for our target population, since we're trying to find resources to help vulnerable populations. And through advocacy, we're showing support for the population as well. And I think we're also letting everyone know why research and clinical trials like this one, who involve women of color, are so important and very much needed.
For me, the Taking Time to Connect study means a beautiful opportunity to get familiar with public health research and learning how to deliver a culturally adapted intervention, and also being able to help other Latinas like myself.
The Taking Time to Connect study really opened the world of public health to me and introduced me to research. I've always seen myself helping others, but I wasn't sure how to do that. And so when I met with Dr. Palacios, it became clear that I could merge my background in kinesiology and merge it with public health. And so that I decided to pursue my master's in public health. And now 1 year into the program, I realized this is where I'm meant to be. So my hope is to continue to be a part of the change to better serve underserved populations.
For me, this study means passion. So I lost my passion for research when I was in the humanities, because I have a humanities background, because I felt like during those studies that I worked in my undergrad, I focused more on writing about the issues, but not really addressing it or being part of the change in those issues. However, this study has shown me that to use research as a way to help vulnerable populations, such as mothers with cancer. And it just has also been great to be surrounded with so many women who are passionate about the study and about this research, and have truly, truly, truly inspired me to want to do better and to see study in a whole different way.
And thank you so much for your time today. Does anyone have any questions?
Well, I'd like to say thank you all for your presentation. It was pretty fantastic to see how all the team members contribute to the clinical trial and all the learning experience you get in return. So thank you for that. I can start off with one question. So you mentioned that you focused on all of your the professional experience that you've received from the clinical trial. And I wanted to ask, on a more personal level, what's something that you feel you've gained from being a part of this clinical trial?
Who would like to go first? You want to go, Adrina?
No, yeah. Well, I think it just really reassured my research, or that I'm even interested in doing research for my career. It really reassured me that this is what I'd like to do for my career. And yeah, it's just so, yeah, it really helped me make some big decisions about life for me personally.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
I think for me, it's taught me to look at everything with just a more critical eye, and be very cautious of how we're trying to reach the audiences we're trying to serve. And like I said, learning okay, this is evidence-based. Who did they test this in, right? These were questions I wasn't necessarily asking before.
Awesome. Thank you.
Also, how to deal with very difficult and emotional situations. I mean, a lot of us are exposed to very difficult stories that are just emotionally difficult, and just learning how to sort of create that separation of I can hear these stories, but I also have to take care of myself. So sort of balancing that is, I feel like it's that a game.
Awesome. Thank you. So I see that someone has their hand raised. Deborah, if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Okay, thank you so much for the presentation. My question is on the recruitment. You talked about recruiting people that are at the early stages of cancer. Was there a reason for that? And also I wanted to know if people that are at their advanced stages, like, you know, were they excluded from the research? Because you said you were measuring anxiety and depression, like in the, yeah. So what was the reason for actually targeting the ones at early stages of cancer?
Sure. So we are targeting the early stages. We are mirroring what the program that we culturally developed, Enhancing Connections. It has shown to help women in the early stages of cancer. So that's why we started with that group. That Enhancing Connections team has done a little more research in advanced cancers, and it's looking like it's also having a positive impact. So we are actually just launching now a new small study to adapt Conexiones for Latina mothers with an advanced cancer diagnosis. And it's a teeny study where they're gonna literally give us their feedback on every session and tell us if it's something that they feel like could serve them as well. Okay. Did that answer your question, or did I miss part of it?
Yeah, thank you.
Was there anything you want to add to that, Dr. Palacios? Targeting early stages?
So I mean, we try to recruit women who have been diagnosed within the last 2 years, so that cancer is fairly recent in their lives and at the highest point of stress in their lives. So for that reason, we've recruited within the last 2 years. In terms of the early stage cancer, I mean, it's a very different phenomenon than someone who has a late stage cancer who is anticipating perhaps that they won't be around much longer, you know, as a result of their advanced stage or metastasized cancer. And so it is kind of two different populations. And when conducting research, you don't want to blend them all into one, because you might get some very fuzzy mixed results or inconclusive results. So that's why we narrow the population sometimes, so that this time we were only focusing on those early stage cancer survivors. With cancer treatment being where it is right now, we know that many of them will go on to live for a very long time, go into remission. And so at least there's always that hope. And so the program might serve them differently than someone who knows that their time might be limited to a certain extent.
You know, I asked the question because, like, in my country, people kind of, most times, not all the time, people are diagnosed maybe like at the point they are diagnosed, it's like, it's really, really advanced already. So it's like it progresses very fast, you know. So most people, they just like feel it's a death sentence, you know, they just feel like, yeah.
I think we experience that here on the border because many folks, I mean, with Hispanic populations, that they're not quite as engaged in being screened for cancer. And so for that reason, they are oftentimes diagnosed at a late stage. And so we experience some of the same things. Their experience with cancer is that someone has cancer, they're going to die. And, you know, that's not necessarily the true, right? I mean, if you have an early stage cancer, it can be treated most effectively and people can live for many, many years. And so that's also an issue here on the border. But we're also dealing with a population that doesn't normally experience cancer. So we're dealing with young Hispanic mothers under 50 years of age. And so that's also unique to the study. And so we know that in recent years or in the past decade or so, we are seeing rising rates of cancer in young populations, especially in Hispanics along the US-Mexico border. So for that reason, we're like discovering that cancer, breast cancer, for example, is occurring at much younger ages in Hispanic women. And we're like, well, why is that, right? And when you have cancer at a young age, at a time when you're probably working, at a time when you're raising children, how intrusive is that cancer, right? It's intrusive for everybody, even for older people, but especially for younger people when they have all these other demands where they're expected to be very active and engaged, right? Especially with our children. But thank you for your question. That's very relevant.
Thank you for the response, Dr. Palacios. I'll go to the next question, which says, can you explain why the control group received a one-time education session? I thought control groups usually do not receive an intervention.
Yeah, so given the population we're working with, it's just unethical not to give them something. So this is why we went with doing a control where we were giving them information and resources so that we weren't just because of the population we're working with, low SES on the border. It wasn't right not to give them something. Is there something you wanted to add to that, Dr. Palacios?
Well, that's exactly the reason we did it, but it's also the case that the control group can have some kind of alternate intervention. That alternate doesn't have to do anything with cancer, right? We could have given anything. We could have given cooking lessons or lessons on how to sew or whatever the case, right? Because we want to make sure that the study group, the experimental group didn't modify their behavior or their experience simply because we were interacting with them, right? The other group is also interacting with us. So we're controlling for that. You all have heard of the Hawthorne effect, that maybe, just by interacting with more directly with the researchers, it might influence the outcomes of the study. And we didn't want that to be a factor either in our study, right? So both are getting an intervention. Ours is getting what we call a control alternative intervention, okay? Or a control comparison intervention. And that's another practice in research as well.
Thank you for your response, Clara and Dr. Palacios. I'll move on to the next question that we have. And it says, have any of you worked with the palliative care team at Memorial Medical Center to discuss their role in cancer treatment and other end of life care they provide? Also, has anyone thought of bringing in someone with a social work background into the study? So 2 questions. I can say them again if you want.
That's okay. So with the palliative care, we're just barely starting to, we just literally got the approval to start working with women in advanced stages. But we are working with Memorial Medical Center. They've been a super incredible, amazing partner from us from the beginning of this study. They were our first medical recruitment site, and so they refer participants to our current study. But we just haven't been specifically in touch with the palliative care team just because we weren't touching that population before. But they are Memorial Medical Center. We have a lot of gratitude for them. They're wonderful. The second question, have we thought of bringing some with social work into the study? We have had people with different backgrounds on the study. So one of our previous health educators on the experimental group was from marriage and family counseling, I believe. And another one from my cohort, she started with me in 2016. She was from social work. She was doing the dual MPH social work program. So we do work with different backgrounds on this study. I don't know if you wanted to add to any of that, Dr. Palacios.
Sure. The palliative care team at MMC, we definitely want to be talking to them as we try to adapt the program, the Conexiones program, for, Hispanic women with advanced cancer. So they are certainly someone to take into consideration in those early qualitative stages, like what should we be looking for? What might these moms need in addition to what we offer with this program? And regarding including folks with social work background, so you should know that the Enhancing Connection program, which we adapted for Latinas, was originally delivered by nurses. And so what we added to, in addition to adapting it for Hispanics, was to transition to a delivery team of bachelor's and master's level public health students. And so that was a novel concept. Like, was it going to work with, training students to deliver the intervention? And that's something that, I hope it's working. Like, we're still in the process. We haven't analyzed our study, but we train our students very, very well. You heard them talking about, it took months for us to be allowed to do data collection or an intervention, right? We make sure that they're trained as well as any of the nurses who have ever delivered this program before. And regarding social work, I know Dr. Lewis, who developed Enhancing Connections, is working with different groups of social workers and therapists to teach them to deliver the intervention as well. So we want to try different models of who can deliver this intervention, which has a potential to bring great benefit to the populations we serve, even to the point of us considering training community health workers or promotoras to, provide the intervention to very hard to reach populations, especially our rural populations. So yeah, thank you for your question, Michael.
Thank you for your response, Clara and Dr. Palacios. We have another question that says, how did you make sure the pandemic has not affected your internal validity in your study?
Well, we are trying to measure that. As Ceci mentioned earlier in the presentation, we did have to add measures to capture the stress that our participants are experiencing due to COVID-19, because our primary outcomes are depression and anxiety in mother and child. So of course, COVID has impacted those primary outcome measures. We have, so we'll see at the end of the study what we see. Dr. Palacios can probably speak more to the type of analysis we would do to analyze that.
So in class, so whoever's had research methods, and some of you are probably going to be exposed to some of this, but you all have been exposed to some degree. We talk about extraneous variables, right? Or historical, threats to validity of the study. The pandemic is a historical threat to the validity of our study, definitely. On the positive end, both the control and the experimental group are experimenting the same historical event. So in that way, it's kind of good. But as Clara was saying, our primary outcomes are anxiety and depression. So what we did is at the time that it occurred, NIH was aware that many of the studies they were funding were going to be affected in the same way as our study. So they released a whole bunch of instruments for researchers to use to help control statistically for some of the effects related to the pandemic. So we are measuring very explicitly through questionnaires, to what extent has the pandemic impacted your level of anxiety, your level of functioning, so many things that could impact the outcome of our particular study that we hope to run as a covariate and control for those effects before examining our study effects. But you're right, there's always that potential that it's going to really throw a monkey wrench in our findings. We're hoping we can control for it statistically through these other measures.
If I may ask, Dr. Palacios, how many participants did you have in the clinical trial before the pandemic started?
Clara, can you help me remember that? Like 20?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I want to say around there. That's probably right. We have about 28 now, 29.
So the other way the pandemic is affecting us is our ability to recruit participants. So it made it that much harder for, people are busy enough with dealing with their cancer diagnosis and their families and their work. And now we're like inviting them to participate in the study. Most of the time they were pretty agreeable, but now you throw a pandemic on top of that and people are like, are you kidding me? I don't have time to think about anything else. Like, and they do agree to participate still, but sometimes we've had a few instances where they've dropped out because it's just too overwhelming for them. They're stretched too thinly. So.
Well, thank you for that. Is there any other questions before we wrap up here? Well, if not, I'd just like to say thank you again for everyone in the team for your presentation. It was fantastic and very inspiring work. So thank you all. And please don't forget to fill out the evaluation form, everyone. Should take less than 2 minutes. It's very short, simple questions. It's going to be at the very top of the chat box. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to showcase our staff.
Thank you.
And I just shared our social media so you guys can follow us, where we post about the clinical trial, and we also conduct our cancer outreach through social media. So like and follow us, please.
And it's at NMSU Cancer Outreach and for Facebook, and at NMSU Cancer for Instagram and Twitter. And I'm just reading them out loud for anybody who might be watching in the recording, and then later point in the future.
Yeah, thank you, Juan Carlos.
And you'll share the link to the recording with us?
Yes, of course. I'll get the presentation finished recording and I'll upload it to YouTube, and then I'll send the link to everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.